Warning: the EdgeRestore underground distribution restoration system operates at high voltage. Failure to observe the precautions below will result in serious personal injury or death. Some of these precautions may differ from your company's operating procedures and rules. Where discrepancy exists, follow your company's operating procedures and rules. This video is intended to be used in conjunction with the instruction sheet that came with your product. The EdgeRestore underground distribution restoration system is installed in pad-mounted distribution transformers. The EdgeRestore systems will work together to isolate faults and restore service using peer-to-peer communications. Become familiar with the parts of the installation. See the written instructions for shipping and packaging information. Danger: make sure the transformer is de-energized, isolated from all power sources, and grounded before starting installation. Failure to completely de-energize the transformer before installing the EdgeRestore underground distribution restoration system will result in severe personal injury or death. Tools are not provided by S&C Electric Company. In addition to the contents of the installation kit, the following tools, supplies, and parts are required. Note: a long style or long reach bit for a socket wrench is recommended. T-handled or L-handled Allen wrenches may not properly clear the top of the bushing well interrupter during installation. Follow these steps to prepare the bushing wells and install the parking stand link bracket. Step 1. If installed, remove the caps or load brake inserts from the H1A and H1B bushing wells. Step 2. Clean the H1A bushing well and H1B bushing well if required, removing all dirt, grease, and moisture with a soft cloth. Notice, the bushing well adapters provided in the installation kit are required for the installation. Standard load brake inserts cannot support the weight of a bushing well interrupter. Failure to install the provided bushing well adapters may result in damage to both the bushing well and bushing well interrupter and may inhibit appropriate installation of the EdgeRestore system. Step 3. Remove the shipping caps and clean the bushing well adapters for the H1A and H1B bushings with a soft cloth. The bushing well adapters are included in the installation kit. They look like load brake inserts but are shorter and gray. Step 4. Grease the bushing well adapters on the taper to be inserted with silicone lubricant included in the installation kit. The larger taper is inserted into the bushing well. Step 5. Install one of the greased bushing well adapters into the H1A bushing well. Torque the bushing well adapter using a bushing well interrupter torque tool. The recommended bushing well interrupter torque tool will make a distinct snap sound when proper torque of 180 inch-pounds is reached. Step 6. Install the remaining bushing well adapter into the H1B bushing well. Torque the bushing well adapter using a bushing well interrupter torque tool. Step 1. Loosen the bolts on the parking stand link bracket. Step 2. Insert the parking stand link bracket into the parking stand by sliding it in from the bottom, up, and then back out until the bolts hit the radius of the stand's opening. Step 3. Insert the parking stand bracket onto the two bolts by aligning the two open slots with the bolts. Make sure the bolts are loose enough to accommodate the width of the parking stand bracket. Step 4. Slide the bracket onto the bolts, and then slide the bracket to the right until the bolts are fully into the grooves. Pull back on the anchor bracket, angled portion, to hold the bolts against the parking stand radius. Step 5. Tighten the 2 bolts with a wrench equipped with a 3/8" socket to a torque of 6 foot-pounds. The EdgeRestore bushing well interrupters are shipped in the closed position. If utility practice prefers they be installed in the open position, they can be opened by pulling the bushing well interrupter's yellow lever. Note: the bushing well interrupters can only be closed again when control power is applied to the control after energization or before energization by using the cordless power module to supply power to the control. Notice: wear work gloves during installation to avoid damage to the black conductive paint covering the bushing well interrupters. Handle with care to avoid scratching the paint. If the paint is scratched and the underlying Sipoxy insulator material is exposed, contact S&C Electric Company. Follow these steps to install the bushing well interrupters. Step 1. Remove the shipping caps from the H1A bushing well interrupter. If not already lubricated, grease the exposed taper of the H1A bushing well adapter with silicone lubricant. Step 2. Slide the current sensor onto the H1A bushing well interrupter with the arrow pointing toward the transformer. Step 3. There is a captive bolt inside the bushing well interrupter. Install the bushing well interrupter onto the bushing well adapter with the yellow lever in the vertical orientation. Notice: tighten the captive bolt to the recommended torque only. Failure to tighten the captive bolt to the recommended torque or over-tightening it may result in equipment damage. Step 4. Tighten the captive bolt using a 3/8" long style Allen wrench to a torque of 23 ± 2 foot-pounds. Step 5. Rotate the current sensor so the writing is facing up and the flat side is horizontal with the wire going under the secondary terminals. When properly installed, the sensor will rest on the bushing well interrupter. Follow these steps to install the H1B bushing well interrupter. Step 1. Remove the shipping caps from the H1B bushing well interrupter. If not already lubricated, grease the exposed taper of the H1B bushing well adapter with silicone lubricant. Lift the H1B bushing well interrupter so that the yellow lever is on the top and slide onto the bushing well adapter. Notice: tighten the captive bolt to the recommended torque only. Failure to tighten the captive bolt to the recommended torque or over-tightening it may result in equipment damage. Step 3. Tighten the captive bolt using a 3/8" long style Allen wrench to a torque of 23 ± 2 foot-pounds. Note: the weight of the H1B bushing well interrupter may cause it to rotate slightly. This rotation will be corrected when the support struts are installed. Note: there is a red band on the H1B control cable to help differentiate the cables when making connections to the control. Follow these steps to install the support strut system. Warning: do not force components into place. Forcing the components into place may cause stress or pressure on the bushing well and bushing well adapter. Loosen and readjust the adjustable links if necessary. Over time, stress may cause damage to the bushing well, resulting in arcing or personal injury. Step 1. Loosen the jam nut of the adjustable link of the support strut. Adjust the length of the H1B adjustable link until the ball joint just fits onto the boss on the H1B bushing well interrupter swivel foot bracket. It may be necessary to rotate the bushing well interrupter to the correct position. Step 2. Connect the adjustable link to the boss using a 1/4" 20 flange head bolt. Hand tighten the bolt. To adjust the H1B bushing well interrupter swivel foot. Step 1. The top of the swivel foot is keyed for an Allen wrench. Tighten the swivel foot until it is hand tight against the transformer wall. Step 2. Tighten the swivel foot 2 to 3 additional turns tighter, 2 or 3 by 360 degrees, using a 3/16" Allen wrench to support the weight of the bushing well interrupter. Note: do not adjust the nut at the bottom of the swivel foot. To install the H1A support strut. Step 1. Adjust the length of the H1A adjustable link until the ball joint just fits onto the boss on the H1A bushing well interrupter bracket. Do not install it. Note: it may be necessary to pivot the bushing well interrupter slightly to fit the ball joint onto the boss. Step 2. Reduce the length of the link by 1/8 inch by turning the end in 2 full turns clockwise, 360 degrees by 2, to support the weight of the bushing well interrupter. Step 3. Lift the H1A bushing well interrupter until the ball joint slips onto the boss. Step 4. Connect the adjustable link to the boss using a 1/4 inch by 20 flange head bolt. Hand tighten. To install the H1A to H1B cross brace link. Step 1. Install the adjustable cross brace link onto the H1B bushing well interrupter boss with a 1/4 inch by 20 flange head bolt finger tight. Step 2. Adjust the length of the cross brace link until the ball joint just fits onto the boss on the H1A bushing well adapter bracket. Step 3. Install a 1/4 inch by 20 flange head bolt finger tight. Step 4. Tighten the 6 1/4 inch by 20 flange head bolts, 2 on each end of the adjustable links, and cross brace link to a torque of 75 inch-pounds. Step 5. Tighten the 3 jam nuts, 1 on each of the 2 adjustable links and 1 on the cross brace link. Follow these steps to install the plugs and caps. Step 1. Attach the plug install removal tool to the end of the plug. The tool will not screw all the way flush to the plug. Step 2. Grease the taper of the plug for the H1A bushing well interrupter with silicone lubricant. Step 3. Install the plug in the H1A bushing well interrupter. This takes substantial force to snap into place and may be easier to do with a shotgun stick or a hook stick fitted with a distribution prong. The plug should be flush with the opening in the bushing well interrupter. Remove the plug install removal tool. Step 4. Install the plug cap over the plug on the H1A bushing well interrupter. The H1B plug and cap is installed the same as the H1A plug and cap. Follow these steps to ground the H1A bushing well interrupter. Notice, the proper function of the power line communication (PLC) feature depends on a good ground connection from the point where the elbow is grounded to the transformer ground bus to the bushing well interrupter grounding point. Failure to make this connection may result in a power line communications error. Contact the local S&C sales office before making any variations in grounding. Additional grounding points are available if required by your company's standard operating practices. Step 1. Install the load break insert and connecting cable according to standard utility practice. Step 2. Connect the drain wire from the tab on the load break insert to the grounding point on the bushing well interrupter and continue on to the elbow neutral. Leave enough slack in the drain wire to enable parking if desired. The grounding point is marked with the symbol for earth ground and 2 holes are provided for attaching drain wires. Be sure to ground the H1A bushing well interrupter cap as shown here. Grounding the H1B bushing well interrupter. Step 1. Install the load break insert and connecting cable according to standard utility practice. Step 2. Connect the drain wire from the tab on the load break insert to the grounding point on the bushing well interrupter and continue on to the elbow neutral. Leave enough slack in the drain wire to enable parking if desired. The grounding point is marked with the symbol for earth ground and 2 holes are provided for attaching drain wires. Be sure to ground the H1B bushing well interrupter cap as shown here. Cable terminations. Terminate the cables with elbows following the elbow manufacturer's instructions. Complete the following steps to install and make connections to the control. Step 1. The hanger and support, when properly assembled, will stand off from the control at a 90-degree angle. Hold the hanger on the upper, low-voltage terminal. Then, hold the support until it touches the back of the transformer enclosure. Make note of which set of holes in the support the hanger aligns with to create a 90-degree angle. Step 2. Snap the holes on the support onto the control hanger. Step 3. Mount the control on the hanger. The control is keyed to the hanger. As an alternative, the control can easily be installed on the parking stand. See the written instructions for details. Step 4. Connect the current sensor connector to the control's 4-pin connector labeled Current Sensor. Follow these steps for normally closed controls. Normally closed controls are identified by a red label. Note, there is a red band on the H1B control cable to help differentiate the H1A and H1B cables from each other when making connections to the control. Ensure that the H1A and H1B cable connections are correctly connected to the control based on the direction of current flow, load or source, through the transformer. Step 1. The bushing well interrupter connected to the source, utility, side cable should be connected to the 6-pin connector that is labeled Source. Step 2. The bushing well interrupter connected to the load, toward the normally open transformer, side cable should be connected to the 6-pin connector labeled Load. Follow these steps for normally open controls. Normally open controls are identified by a green label. Note, there is a red band on the H1B control cable to help differentiate the cables when making connections to the control. Step 1. The bushing well interrupter normally closed should be connected to the 6-pin connector labeled Normally Closed 6-pin connector. Step 2. The bushing well interrupter that is normally open should be connected to the Normally Open 6-pin connector. A control power connector is included in the installation kit. Connect the black 10-gauge wire to X1 or X3 on the secondary transformer, and the white 10-gauge wire to X2. Typically, there is a lighting connection on the transformer's secondary connections that can be used for this purpose. Then, plug the 6-pin connector into the power abnormal connector on the control. Notice, train the control cables so they are not pinched by the enclosure cover when the cover is closed. Before closing the transformer cover, ensure that the cover does not make contact with the control. The EdgeRestore underground distribution restoration system is highly flexible in how it can be applied on a loop. It can be installed either on all transformers or just on some, depending on the loop design and the amount of sectionalization desired. An example loop, including 8 normally closed transformers and 1 normally open transformer, is shown here. S&C recommends exporting a diagram of each loop where the EdgeRestore system is to be installed from the utility's Geographic Information System, GIS. Record the transformer designations of each EdgeRestore system-enabled transformer along with the designations of the load and source side cables for normally closed transformers. Also record the cable designations of the normally open and normally closed cables on the normally open transformer. Because each installation is unique and standard utility practice varies by utility, a system example is used here to illustrate the recommended system planning. Use the GIS export to fill out a system plan. A sample completed system plan can be found on page 28 of the written instructions. Confirm the accuracy of the system plan after arriving at the installation site. Transfer transformer information in the sample loop plan to the EdgeRestore Underground Distribution Restoration System commissioning procedure. S&C recommends starting at source 1 on the loop and commissioning each transformer in order around the loop, ending with the transformer fed by source 2. Full instructions for using the cordless power module, as well as opening and closing the bushing well interrupters, can be found in S&C Instruction Sheet 676-540. Use the procedures on page 29 of the written instructions as a template for a commissioning plan. Fill in the system designations from the GIS export as applicable. The transformer commissioning procedure will be the same for all normally closed transformers and all normally open transformers. For an EdgeRestore system with a normally closed transformer, Step 1. Make sure the EdgeRestore system installation procedure has been completed. Step 2. Make sure the source control cable is connected to the source connector on the control. Step 3. Make sure the load control cable is connected to the load connector on the control. Step 4. Apply power to the control using the cordless power module. Step 5. Wait until the control power LED stops blinking. Step 6. Open the H1A bushing well interrupter by pulling the yellow lever forward once. Step 7. Close the H1A bushing well interrupter by toggling the handle from the open, green, and locked position to the ready position 3 times, ending in the ready position. Step 8. Make sure the delay LED is blinking. It will blink 10 times and then the bushing well interrupter will close. Step 9. Make sure the indicator on the bushing well interrupter is in the closed, red, and ready position. Step 10. Open the H1B bushing well interrupter by pulling the yellow lever forward once. Step 11. Close the H1B bushing well interrupter by toggling the handle from the open and locked position to the ready position 3 times, ending in the ready position. Step 12. Make sure the delay LED is blinking. It will blink 10 times and then the bushing well interrupter will close. Step 13. Make sure the indicator on the bushing well interrupter is in the closed and ready position. Step 14. Remove the cordless power module. For an EdgeRestore system with a normally open transformer, Step 1. Make sure the EdgeRestore system installation procedure has been completed. Step 2. Make sure the normally closed control cable is connected to the normally closed connector on the control. Step 3. Make sure the normally open control cable is connected to the normally open connector on the control. Step 4. Apply power to the control using the cordless power module. Step 5. Wait until the control power LED stops blinking. Step 6. Open the H1A bushing well interrupter by pulling the yellow lever forward once. Step 7. Close the H1A bushing well interrupter by toggling the handle from the open, green, and locked position to the ready position 3 times, ending in the ready position. Step 8. Make sure the delay LED is blinking. It will blink 10 times and then the bushing well interrupter will close. Step 9. Make sure the indicator on the bushing well interrupter is in the closed and ready position. Step 10. Open the H1B bushing well interrupter by pulling the yellow lever forward once. Step 11. Close the H1B bushing well interrupter by toggling the handle from the open and locked position to the ready position 3 times, ending in the ready position. Step 12. Make sure the delay LED is blinking. It will blink 10 times and then the bushing well interrupter will close. Step 13. Make sure the indicator on the bushing well interrupter is in the closed, red, and ready position. Step 14. Open the normally open bushing well interrupter by pulling the lever forward once. Then push the lever once back towards the transformer into the ready position. Step 15. Remove the cordless power module. If you have any questions, please visit our website at snc.com.